Hey guys, welcome back. I want to share with you the story where I ended up in the hospital. It's one of the events that that happened in the beginning that led to this was when I had to go to the doctor. So I go to the doctor every 3 months to make sure I'm good, that I have no STIs, that my viral load is good. So, well, I want to make sure that I'm undetectable. So I go to the doctor and I see gangstalkers everywhere. I turn left and then one person does that, and then I turn right, then they do that. I'm driving on the freeway and wherever I look there is a light blinking, there's a stoplight. The things that I have been sensitized to that I now perceive as signs of me being gangstalked are on full blast, like everywhere I go. And I am just, my confirmation bias kicks in and I'm just looking around, looking for confirmations that I am in fact getting gangstalked. So as I'm driving, I began to look. There was a white car in front of me, and for some reason white just had this calming effect, and I began to get sleepy. This was when I had that delusion where the white color was supposed to hypnotize me. And the crazy thing was that my eyes would physically be pulled towards that color, like without my consent. I would just relax and then my consciousness would move to the back of my eyes. And then the voice said, let me control you. Look at the color white. Look at it. So then I did just that. And then I began to feel calm, almost like if I was in a trance. So then I said, no, I'm not gonna allow them to put me in the trance again. So whenever I relaxed, I would feel that my consciousness would go back, and then the force that was moving my eyes, the shadow that actually had its own voice and its own personality, took over and was able to kind of just control my eyes to move me. So then I said, no, this is not gonna happen. So I just stopped. I mustered all my volition to move my consciousness to the front of my eyes. So I began using my peripheral vision, and that woke me up. So every time that I looked at something that I had been sensitized to, my memory played an event that had to do with what I was sensitized to, and it tied into a memory that a painful memory that I had endured when I was getting gangstalked. So everything that I looked at just was somehow related to something that had to do with gangstalking, and it would just pull me back to that. And that's what I believe. I opened my phone and I typed in on Evernote, and I made a voice recording to say, and I began talking. I want to talk about the mechanics of hypnotism. The mechanics of hypnotism is when you relax your mind, and your immediate consciousness is lost in the memories. So then your subconscious just comes to the front, and then it is when it becomes vulnerable. It is when it can be sensitized. This is when I realized that for the past months I had been in a jail. I had in a mental jail where where my mind was just like stuck in a circle where everywhere I looked, there was just something, a trigger that pulled back a painful memory. And then it got back in there, and I wasn't allowed to have thoughts of my own. And I just wasn't able to understand. I was understanding it. So then I made a note of this, of the mechanics of, not of sensitizing, but of hypnotizing, of hypnotization, of how I was actually being hypnotized without them telling me. I was indirectly being hypnotized by these gangstalkers. My mind was in a cage. And I couldn't have thoughts of my own. Every time I would just try to think out of anything, I would look at something that was white, and boom, it would just brought in. And the color white would just immediately pull my consciousness to the back of my head. And I would just get lost in the memories. So then, fuck, what was I? Oh, so I made a note of the mechanics of this, and then I was done with my doctor's appointment. And I sat there in my car, and then I said, there's something there has to be something I can do about being hypnotized. There has to be something. So I said, I'm gonna make a lock about to my mind. So then I grabbed the air freshener that is called Black Ice, and then I pulled out my switch. I was in my car when this happened. And then I said, I told my car, like, I was in the back of my consciousness. I was in the state of hypnotization. By this point, I knew how to recognize when I was malleable, when my mind was malleable. So then I said, my mind will only be malleable when these two things are together. And I turn on my Nintendo Switch, and I put on Bayonetta 2, and then I smelled my Black Ice air freshener, and it says I have to be looking at the image of the start screen of the game Bayonetta 2 on Nintendo Switch while I smell when this smell is present. So this smell was only in my car. So that would be the only time where I could be manipulated. So I felt like it worked. Like, I did that, and I smelled it, and I just solidified this thought. And then I kept replaying the image of Bayonetta with the color blue and the little logo. And then I was done with my doctor's appointment, and then I went to work. So I was at work, and then a throbbing, extremely painful toothache began. It was insane, and it was just throbbing and pounding. I knew my teeth were right, so I was like, they're doing this with direct energy weapons. There's no way. I know my teeth are fine. I was the closing staff at O'Reilly Auto Parts. And when you're closing, you have to wipe the counters, wipe the glass of the front entrance. You have to sweep, and you have to front face the entire store. And you have to take out the trash. So the entire day went by, and the entire day I had this throbbing pain on my molar. And this is when I discovered that it wasn't a direct energy weapon, because I was able to pull the pain and lift it. And then I was able to pull it away from my gums. And the pain was suspended. The energy beam, what I always thought that was a direct energy weapon, was simply suspended in midair, right on top of my molar, where it didn't hurt anymore. So I spent 6 hours pulling this beam of energy that I felt on my molar away from my gums, where it wouldn't hurt, where it would be away from my molar. And then I just told myself, I am not gonna demonstrate that I'm in pain. These motherfuckers are never gonna know that I am in pain, that they're causing me pain. I'm not gonna give them satisfaction to allow them to know that their manipulation tactics have actually been really effective. So the day went by, and then I was back in the back. My consciousness was behind my eyes, and I was playing with it because I was like pushing it forward, and I felt awake, like I was me again. But then when I relaxed, my consciousness just went behind my eyes, and then my mind just visualized my eye, looking at it from my profile perspective, were like some type of, almost like a gas would just, like a yellow gas would pretty much, almost like if it was like my soul, would just pretty much protrude through my optic nerve and then just move to the front of my eyes, and then I would be awake. I would be out of the delusion. But then I would relax, and it would automatically just pull me back. And I felt like this shadow, that it was just moving around my body, that whenever I relax, when my being just went behind, I would feel the shadow just encompass everything behind my head. And I was feeling the pain, and I was trying to move this shadow thing that was on my head, and I would just move it from there, because I felt like it was this remote control thing, that whenever it got back to my head, I would just go in a trance again. And then I was like, I'm in a trance right now. But gangstalkers cannot manipulate me because I have that lock. I'm gonna do something about it. So then I began visualizing the starting screen of the video game that I told you. And I began imagining the smell. I remembered we have that scent in the restroom at work. So I went to the restroom. I told Juan, because I was closing with him, Shamu. And I went to the restroom, and I began smelling the black eyes air freshener, and I began visualizing the start screen of the video game. And then I said, I want to understand everything that gangstalkers have done to me. And then the voice just said, Efren, don't do that. And then the shadow that had become amicable, the one that said that gangstalkers had taken my spirit and trained it to help them, and they released the shadow back to me. That voice said, Efren, no, don't do it. You're gonna die. It's way too much information. If you understand everything, you're gonna have a stroke. Vas a tener un derrame cerebral. The voices that I was hearing were in Spanish. And it said, they just said, no, don't do that. So I didn't care. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be manipulated by these people for the rest of my life. I'm either gonna die trying to be free again, but I don't care if I die. I don't give a fuck. And my head became really hot. I began sweeping the carpets at work. And then Juan said he needs to keep talking to the voices. He was a gangstalker, and he knows that in order for you to cement the voices in your head, you have to interact with them, you have to talk to them. But there was no way I was gonna say anything. I just completely ignored that. So I kept sweeping, and something happened. I began understanding how your brain, how the perception of reality has an effect on how you perceive, how your brain produces your perception of reality. So I began sweeping, and then I felt how my brain literally just gathered all the informations, all the sensation of me holding the broom, of me using my obliques to twist to move the broom, how it was taking the feedback from the optical nerve, from whatever you were looking at, to produce how much force your body needed to produce with your muscles. But I was feeling that with every single muscle. I understood how your brain produced reality. And I began just having flashbacks of the gangstalker sign, of the gangstalker evil grin, how they every time I looked, they would just turn their head and they would just make you have this negative emotion. I understood the mechanics of the perception of reality of the brain. It was the most amazing experience I had ever had. But the voices began to panic. They said, Efren, that's way too much information. So then I just felt like my brain was so malleable. I heard a mosquito just fly. And then Juan said something. And then I felt that my brain began crossing wires where the mosquito somehow got connected to what Juan said. And then every time I heard the mosquito pass by me, I would hear my brain recorded the voice that Juan said. And then whenever the mosquito, my brain didn't hear the mosquito, but it just played Juan's voice instead. My head began to feel hot, and everything that I was hearing, my sensations were mixing with what I was looking at. So I would just hear something, and then I would feel my foot move. All my five senses were just crisscrossing, and I began to feel dizzy. And the voice began panicking, and it just said, "Efren, you're gonna fucking die! Stop it!" But I couldn't stop it. I just couldn't stop it. So then I said, fuck, I'm exhausted. I need some sugar. So I told Juan, I need to go to get a drink. So I went to the liquor store. I walked out, and then I grabbed 2 Arizona teas because I know they have so much sugar. And I just chugged one, and then I bought them. I went to work, back to work, and then I chugged one. And I feel better. But it was getting worse still. So then I said, Juan, I need to take a break right now. So then I just went, and I didn't care if he said or not, if he approved or not. I just went and I sat down. And then I heard the same mosquito again. The mosquito was here. And it was so intense. And I just began freaking out. I was filled with paranoia because my brain was hot. The voices were just yelling in my ear. They were like, Efren, you're gonna die. Vas a tener un derrame cerebral. Te vas a morir. And I was fucking dying. I was so sure of it. So I stood up, and I could barely get to the phone. I called 911. I told him, this is an emergency. I need help. I'm at O'Reilly Auto Parts in Imperial Beach, blah, 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 address. The guys need to come right now. I wasn't done drinking my second Arizona tea when I heard the ambulance get in front of the store. So then the ambulance came to work. Came to the O'Reilly Auto Parts, and I used all my might to not show any emotion, to appear to be 100% right, because I was not gonna give Gangstalkers the pleasure of watching me fucking die. No way. So I told him I don't feel well. The emergency people, it was 2 guys. They came here, and then they were like, is everything okay? I was like, no, I need help right now. I feel like I'm freaking dying. So they took me, and I don't know how Juan closed the store, but he ended up closing the store by himself. Well, they took me into the ambulance, and they began asking me all these questions. And I placed my Arizona tea right next to the bed where they laid me down. And then one of the EMTs, literally walked and bam, he threw my Arizona tea away. I needed it. I was like, what are you doing? I need sugar. Do you have anything with sugar here? I'm freaking dying. And he just said, no, I'm sorry. And I was like, you need to stop the ambulance right now. I need some sugar. I'm freaking dying. And he said, sorry, we already closed the door, and we already began driving, so we cannot open the door again until we get to the hospital. Sorry. I was like, this mother. I am not gonna die. So I mustered all my might to keep myself awake. And everything every single sound, every single beep was just replaying. It was echoing every single thing that I heard, and they just began accumulating one on top of the other, on top of the other. And my mind was so full of different noises. Like everything was just accumulating on top of the other. It was a disaster in my head. And I was so ready. I began writing on my phone, if I die, it is because this EMT didn't allow me to have sugar because he wanted me to die. I was losing my mind. Literally, I felt like how my mind was slowly being destroyed. I was about to be turned into a crazy motherfucker. The gangstalking operation was about to conclude. I was about to lose my mind. And all because I didn't have a freaking sugary drink on me. Well, we got to the hospital, and I was panicking because I felt like I was dying, like I was losing my mind. Literally every second, my mind was pulled away from me. And I just wanted to stand up and just scream. And well, they got me onto the front of the hospital, and I had to sit down. And I was like, "Do you have a vending machine? I need some sugar right now." "No, sorry, we don't." And I was like, "Well, I'm here waiting. Do you have anything with sugar? I need some sugar right now." And they were jerks about it. And they didn't have anything. And I was like, "Well, I need some water at least." And they were like, "Well, there's no vending machine here. Sorry." So then I was like, "Well, do you have a water fountain?" They were like, "Well, yeah, it's over there." So I was like, "Well, I need a cup. I need some water." I was mustering all my might to not stand up and give gangstalkers the pleasure of watching me turn into an insane person. I was this close to losing it. So I was gonna do everything in my might not to. So I was just this close to losing it. I went, and they finally gave me a freaking foam cup well, they took my name, they wrote it down, and then they finally gave me a cup. But I had to almost murder the person. I began yelling because they wouldn't give me anything to drink water. So I was like, "Where's the water fountain?" Oh, it's in the room. So I went, and I'm sure I looked like an insane person because I was, but I was doing everything possible not to explode. I was literally losing my mind by the second. So I went, I grabbed some water, I drank it, and then I sat down. I need to drink more water. And then I sat down back again, and then I went to the water fountain, and then there was one woman staring at me. And I was so sure she was a gangstalker. She had this face of horror. And because I was so into the gangstalking mindset, that I was so sure that she was one of them. And that she was disappointed because I wasn't blowing up. I wasn't giving gangstalkers what they wanted, which was to watch me lose my mind. Everything that I was hearing was echoing. So I literally had to, those people that you see in movies that are crazy, that are in a corner, covering their ears and looking down and then just swaying. That was me. Because everything that I would hear would echo, and then it would just go on top of what I was hearing, and then my mind was just a complete and utter disaster. And I was there for 1 hour. An hour and a half. And there were people around me, and they were allowed in. And they were like waiting. And they literally began talking to each other. They were like, where is it? Why isn't he doing it? They were waiting for me to blow up and to confirmed to them that I was a crazy person. They were ready with their cell phones. At least that's what I felt like. Honestly, I don't think that that's what they were doing, but I was just so sure of it. So then, it finally was my turn. They sat me down furthest away from everyone, and they didn't even let me inside the clinic. It was like an outside clinic. If they were like, the nurses were being total cunts, and then they just let me walk by, and they put me. I was all at the very end, and I was just feeling how the voice that I was hearing was connected to me. Like, I began feeling, you know, acupuncture, where you have this image where like all these little dots, and I was feeling how these dots, these points of energy, where I felt them, and they were cross wires. So remember that I felt the shadow being on my left foot. Well, the voice was telling me, the voice told me, well, now you see. The voice, my spirit told me, you know why that is why I'm so horny. Because I am attached to your right hand, which is the hand that I with. And I saw all the connections to my brain, to my left hand and my left foot. And then I just felt like I was about to pass out. So I tried to sleep, and then someone that was freaking a random person literally walked by me and kicked my foot to wake me up, and he said, "You're not gonna fall asleep." That's what I needed. I needed to rest. Then after sitting there for an hour, and whenever I was trying to fall asleep, someone came by and said, "Oh, hey, how are you?" to keep me awake. At least that's what it felt like. So they came in with an IV with sodium. I was low on sugar. Duh, fool. I knew that. I told you from the very beginning what it was. And I was like, I need something with sugar, and they just were giving me apple juice, the tiniest apple juice bottles you can possibly imagine. And I had like 6 of them. And then when they put the IV on me, I just felt that everything was rewiring. My brain was rewiring. I was just resting, and then they were closing the clinic. You have to go now. You're fine. I felt better. So, okay, thank you. So, I got up. I was staying at the homeless shelter at Father Joe's village. So, well, I was there at the hospital, and I called an Uber because there was no way I was driving. I left my car at the auto parts store. So then I stood up, and then when anyone said something, it began echoing. And then I heard I was standing there in front of the nurses. And the nurses said, "How did he do that?" And I said, that stuff was so real. Yeah, that was so real. How did he do that? And then the other one was like, I don't know. What were they talking about? How did I do what? Survive? Not go crazy? So then I was hearing the echoes of every single sound, every single sensation was just echoing in my mind. And then I just have to hold on to something. So then I told the nurses, I'm not well still. I don't feel well. And they said, well, we cannot give you an MRI right now. We're about to close. Sorry. So then I was like, I have to go home. So my Uber arrived. I sat there. And I literally was just covering my ears. I closed my eyes to block any type of sensory input, because everything that I was hearing would echo in my mind. I was so sure that was how I was gonna die, that I was gonna literally lose my mind, where I was hearing they were gonna just, anything that I heard would just echo on top of the other, and I would just have all these echoes of any type of sensory input I would have. So the Uber was done. I was there, and I got inside the homeless shelter and I went right to sleep. I closed my eyes. There was no one in the room. It was only me. None of my roommates were there. And then I heard a dog bark, and then I would just hear bark, 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 endlessly. And then I heard a door slam, and then it was bark, door slam, bark, door slam, bark, door slam. And then I went, and then it was bark, door slam, bark, door slam. And they were accumulating one on top of the other. And then boom, I passed out. And then it was over. That happened within a span of 3 hours. And it was the most incredible shit I have ever experienced. It was so intense, it was so crazy, but the next day I was full of life, full of adrenaline, because it was such a mind fuck. I was in love with gangstalking more than ever. I felt like I had beat them. That the whole conspiracy of them driving me crazy wasn't successful. That I beat the gangstalking operation. I understood a new concept of how your brain produces your reality. I understood more than ever, but I was super confused still. And that was the time where I ended up in the hospital. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure telling you my story. Bye.